The night didn't start with fireworks or a fight. It started with silence. Meredith was standing under those cheap, flickering string lights at the edge of the dance floor, her back to me, and for the first time in years, I couldn't recognize her. Not because she looked different, but because of how she carried herself, like she was untouchable, like I didn't exist. And maybe I didn't, at least not in her world anymore. I wasn't even angry at first. I just watched, clutching my half-empty glass as she moved closer to him. Every step she took with that stranger felt like a countdown. I couldn't stop. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in forever. And that's when it hit me like a sucker punch. She wasn't mine anymore. Not really. Maybe she hadn't been for a long time, and I was just too stupid to see it. The song playing was slow, one of those songs that make couples hold on tight like they're in a movie. And there she was, leaning into him, her head tilted up, as if the rest of the room didn't exist. Me? I was just the ghost standing on the sidelines. The glass slipped from my hand, hit the floor, and shattered. No one noticed, not even her. That was the moment I walked out. I didn't say a word. I didn't even look back. If she wanted to dance like I was invisible, I'd show her what invisible really felt like. But here's the twist I didn't expect. The second I left, she came running. I heard her heels before I saw her. The sound of them striking the pavement was frantic, uneven, like she was running for her life. By then, I was already sitting in the car with the engine off, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to hear the excuses I knew were coming, but she yanked the door open anyway, her breath catching like she'd just realized I could actually leave. "Why did you just walk out?" she demanded, her voice trembling in a way I hadn't heard before. I didn't answer right away. I wanted her to sweat, to feel the sting I'd felt, watching her melt into the stranger's arms. "Because," I finally said, "you danced with him like I wasn't even there, like I don't exist." She froze, her face pale in the dull yellow glow of the parking lot lights. For a split second, I saw something raw in her expression. Not guilt exactly, but fear. Then she said something that didn't make sense at all. "You don't understand. That wasn't what it looked like." I almost laughed. Was she really going to try the oldest line in the book? But before I could snap back, she added something that made my skin crawl. "If I don't keep him happy tonight, things will get worse for all of us." What did that even mean? I stared at her, waiting for her to explain, but she just bit her lip like she'd said too much. My mind started spinning. Who was this guy? What could he possibly have over her, or over us, that would make her act like that? She begged me to come back inside, but I refused. That's when she whispered, "Please, I can't explain here, not where he can see." And just like that, I realized this wasn't just about a dance anymore. Something was happening that I didn't understand. Something bigger, darker, and far beyond the humiliation I'd felt on that dance floor. I didn't sleep that night. Meredith pretended everything was fine when we got home, but I could feel her nervous energy radiating through the walls. She stayed quiet, too quiet, moving around the house like she was trying not to make noise, like she was afraid of waking something dangerous. Every time I asked her what she meant back in the parking lot about keeping him happy, she'd shake her head and say, "It's complicated." That was it. No explanation, no reassurance, just those two words that made me feel like I was losing my mind. Around midnight, I went outside to clear my head. The air was heavy, warm, but not in a comforting way. It felt charged, like a storm was coming. That's when I noticed something weird. A car I didn't recognize parked down the street. Black sedan, tinted windows. It wasn't from the neighborhood, and the way it was positioned, half a block away just sitting there, it made my stomach twist. I stayed on the porch, staring at it, half expecting it to drive away. It didn't. I swear I saw the faint glow of a cigarette being lit inside. When I came back in, Meredith was sitting at the kitchen table with her head in her hands. She looked up at me, eyes wide and glossy. "You don't understand what you saw tonight," she said quietly. "That man, he's not just some guy I danced with. He's—" She stopped herself, biting her lips so hard it nearly bled. Then she said, "If I tell you, I'm putting you in danger too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to shake her, demand the truth, but the fear in her eyes made me freeze. Fear like I'd never seen in her before. "Meredith," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "are you in some kind of trouble?" She didn't answer. She just walked past me, went into the bedroom, and locked the door. I spent the rest of the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with possibilities. Was this man blackmailing her? Did she owe him money? Or was there something darker, something criminal? The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to sit around and be left in the dark. I was going to find out who that stranger was, even if it meant digging into things I had no business knowing. The morning after that bizarre night, Meredith acted like nothing had happened. She moved around the kitchen in her robe, humming to herself as she made coffee, while I sat there watching her like she was a stranger in my own house. I wanted to ask her again about the man at the dance hall, but I knew she wouldn't give me anything. Every time I brought him up, I could see the way her shoulders tensed, as if even hearing his name, though I didn't know it yet, was enough to make her shut down completely. Something inside me snapped that morning. I couldn't keep pretending. So, when she left the house later, saying she was meeting a friend for lunch, I followed her. I told myself I wasn't the kind of guy who spies on his wife, but honestly, I was done being the clueless fool in my own marriage. I waited a few minutes, then grabbed my keys and drove, keeping just far enough behind her car so she wouldn't notice. She didn't go to the cafe she claimed she was headed to. Instead, she drove across town, past the familiar streets, into an area I knew she never visited. I watched her park outside an old, run-down warehouse near the edge of the industrial district. The place looked like it hadn't seen real business in decades. Rusted metal doors, graffiti scrawled across the walls, broken glass glittering on the pavement. She got out of the car, checked her phone nervously, and walked inside. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Who meets someone in a place like that? I waited a few minutes before I followed. I crept along the side of the building, listening. The moment I stepped closer to one of the broken windows, I heard voices. Heron and his. "Why are you pushing this so hard?" she said, her tone low and desperate. "You know why," the man replied. His voice was calm, almost cold. "You owe me. And until that's settled, you'll do what I ask." I froze. Owe him? What the hell was she involved in? I peeked through the gap in the window and saw them standing close. Too close. He was tall, wearing a leather jacket that looked more like armor than clothing, and there was something about his posture, the way he tilted his head when he looked at her, that made my blood run cold. It wasn't just confidence, it was control. Meredith looked terrified. She glanced toward the door like she wanted to leave, but he put his hand on her arm, just enough to stop her. That was it. I couldn't stay hidden anymore. I stormed inside, my footsteps echoing through the empty hall. "What the hell is going on here?" I shouted, my voice louder than I expected. Meredith spun around, her eyes wide with shock, and the man slowly turned to face me. He didn't look surprised. In fact, he looked like he'd been expecting me. The moment I stepped into that dim warehouse, everything about the air shifted. It wasn't just the damp smell of rust and dust, but the way the man, this stranger who seemed to hold some invisible leash over my wife, smiled at me. It wasn't friendly, it wasn't mocking, it was something worse. It was the kind of smile that said, "I know things you don't." Meredith's face drained of color when she saw me. "Evan, what are you doing here?" she whispered, as if my presence was the worst possible thing that could happen. That alone made my blood boil. Why should she be worried that I was here, unless there was something to hide? "You want to explain to me why my wife is meeting some guy in a place like this?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay steady. I wanted to sound angry, but not scared. Except I was scared, and I think he saw that. The man took a step forward. He was taller up close, lean, but with that wiry strength you just know could snap someone in half. "You must be Evan," he said calmly, like we were old acquaintances. "I was wondering when you'd finally grow a spine and show up." Meredith moved between us, her hands trembling. "Please, both of you stop," she said, glancing back at him with this pleading look that made my stomach twist. "Evan, just go home. I'll explain everything later." I wasn't going anywhere. "No, you'll explain it now, Meredith. Who is this guy? What does he have on you?" The stranger tilted his head, studying me like I was an insect pinned to a board. "You really don't know, do you?" he said, almost amused. "She never told you about what happened last year?" I shot a look at Meredith, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. "What is he talking about?" I asked her, my voice cracking despite me trying to sound in control. She took a step back, as if trying to physically distance herself from my questions. "Evan, please, you don't need to know everything. It's better if—" "No," the man interrupted, his tone sharp. "He deserves to know. After all, you've been lying to him for months." He turned to me with a smirk. "Your wife owes me a debt, not money, something bigger. And she's been trying to pay it off in ways you wouldn't understand. My chest tightened. I didn't even know what he meant, but the way Meredith flinched told me he wasn't lying. What debt? Meredith, what did you do? She finally looked at me, tears brimming in her eyes. It's not what you think, she said softly, her voice breaking. But I can't explain it here. Please, let's just go home. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to take her hand and walk away from that freezing hollow building and pretend none of this was happening. But before I could decide, the man stepped closer, his voice dropping into something almost menacing. If you walk away now, Evan, you'll never really know who your wife is. But if you stay, you'd better be ready to hear the truth. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't just dealing with some random guy. There was a history here, something ugly and hidden, and I was about to rip it open whether I wanted to or not. I don't know what I expected to hear in that moment. Maybe some confession about an old debt or a stupid mistake she'd made years ago. But the words that came out of his mouth didn't just surprise me. They shattered every illusion I had about the life I thought I was living. She didn't tell you about the fire, did she? The man asked, his voice as steady as if he were reading the weather report. 2 summers ago, out on Miller Road, that cabin that burned down in the middle of the night, the one that made the local news for a week? She was there, Evan. She's the reason it went up in flames. Meredith's entire body went rigid. Stop, she hissed, her voice trembling. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about, he replied, stepping closer. His eyes locked on mine. You see, your wife wasn't always the perfect little angel you think she is. She and I, we have history. And that night, when things got out of control, I covered for her. I made sure no one traced it back to her. But favors like that, they don't come free. I couldn't process what I was hearing. I turned to Meredith, hoping for a quick denial, something that would tell me this was all a lie. But she just stood there, frozen, her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Meredith, I said, my voice shaking, tell me he's lying. Tell me this isn't true. She closed her eyes, and that was all the answer I needed. My knees felt weak, and I had to lean against one of the rusted beams just to stay upright. The silence was worse than any argument we'd ever had. Finally, she whispered, It was an accident, Evan. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. I was there, but I didn't start the fire. I swear I didn't. He's twisting everything. The man chuckled softly, and that sound made my blood boil. Accident or not, she owes me. And until she pays that debt, she'll keep doing what I ask. That's why she danced with me like you weren't there. Because she doesn't have a choice. My head was spinning. My wife, the woman I'd built my entire life around, was standing there like a stranger, caught in some twisted web with this man who seemed to own her in ways I couldn't even understand. I wanted to grab her hand, drag her out of that place, but I couldn't move. I couldn't stop hearing those words over and over in my head. She was there. She owes me. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice breaking. Why would you hide something like this from me? She finally met my eyes, and in that instant, I saw the kind of fear that goes deeper than guilt or shame. Because, she said, her voice barely audible, if you knew, you'd never look at me the same way again. The man smirked, satisfied, like he'd just driven a knife between us and twisted it. She's right about that, he said. You want to know more? Fine, but once you hear the rest, there's no going back. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't leave. Not until I knew everything. The warehouse seemed to shrink around us as his words sank in, like the walls themselves were leaning in to hear the rest of this twisted story. Meredith's breathing was uneven, her hands clenching and unclenching at her sides, and for a moment, I wasn't sure who terrified me more, her or him. The man took a slow step forward, his voice calm, deliberate, like he enjoyed peeling back layers of a wound just to watch it hurt. That cabin, he said, his eyes flicking to Meredith with a mix of anger and amusement, wasn't just any place. It belonged to someone who owed me, someone who thought they could run from me. Meredith was there that night because she thought she could fix things, make it all right. But when things went wrong, when the fire started, she didn't run. She stayed. She watched it burn. Stop! Meredith's voice cracked like glass. Don't you dare twist this! She turned to me, her eyes wide and desperate. Evan, you have to believe me. I wasn't there to hurt anyone. I went to talk to him, to end all of this once and for all. But by the time I got there, the place was already on fire. He's been holding this over me, making me feel like I'm guilty of something I didn't do. The man smirked, shaking his head. You think he'll believe that? You think he'll believe you just happened to be there, conveniently, while a man's property burned to the ground? He turned to me, his gaze sharp enough to cut through bone. I have pictures, Evan. I have proof. One word from me and your wife spends the rest of her life paying for a crime she didn't confess to. I stared at Meredith, my mind trying to process the chaos of it all. Pictures? Meredith, why didn't you tell me about this? Why would you let this man have that kind of power over you? Her shoulders sagged, like the weight of her secrets was crushing her. Because I thought I could handle it. I thought I could keep it from touching our lives. You're too good for this, Evan. I didn't want you dragged into the mess I made. Her voice cracked again. I was scared you'd hate me. Hate her? I didn't even know what I felt. My chest ached with anger, fear, confusion. Everything tangled up into one sickening knot. Meredith, I said, my voice shaking, you've been lying to me. For how long? All this time I thought we were just normal. And all along, you've been hiding this? The man chuckled again, a low sound that made my stomach turn. You think this is the whole story? No, Evan. This is just the beginning. That fire, it wasn't the first time your wife's choices caught up to her, and it won't be the last, unless you're ready to do what's necessary to end this. I turned to him, my fists clenched. And what exactly do you want from us? He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of smoke on his jacket, like the memory of that fire still clung to him. I want what I'm owed. And if she won't give it, then maybe you will. Meredith grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Evan, don't listen to him. He's trying to pull you into this too. Don't let him. But the look in the man's eyes told me he wasn't bluffing. He had something real, something dangerous, and I knew, deep down, that I was already in it, whether I wanted to be or not. I stood there, torn between believing the woman I loved and the venom dripping from this man's words. My mind was a storm, flashes of Meredith's smile, her laugh, the life we'd built, colliding with the fear and guilt I saw in her eyes now. I realized something in that moment, whatever had happened in her past. Whoever this man thought he was, I wasn't going to let him own her anymore. Enough, I said, my voice firm, stronger than I felt. I stepped in front of Meredith, placing myself between her and him. You've had your fun, but this ends now. You think you can control her, intimidate her, threaten me? Not anymore. You want to show your so-called evidence? Go ahead. But I'm not letting you ruin our lives with fear. The man's smirk faltered just slightly. You have no idea what you're stepping into, Evan. Maybe not, I shot back. But I do know that whatever you're holding over her, we'll face it together. I'm done watching from the sidelines like I'm invisible. She's my wife, and you're not taking that away from me. Meredith's hand tightened on my arm. I could feel her trembling, but when I turned to look at her, I saw something different, something I hadn't seen in months. Hope. She nodded slightly like she finally believed I was strong enough to stand beside her. The man stared at us for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether to push or retreat. Then, with a bitter laugh, he shook his head. Fine. You think love is enough? Good luck with that. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing in the hollow warehouse until the door slammed shut behind him. The silence that followed was deafening. Meredith collapsed into my arms, sobbing, her voice shaking as she said, I'm so sorry, Evan. I should have told you everything. I was just so scared I'd lose you. You're not losing me, I whispered, holding her tighter. We're not letting him control you anymore. We'll go to the police if we have to. We'll tell the truth. No more secrets, Meredith. Not between us. And for the first time in what felt like years, she smiled through her tears. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy, but in that moment, I knew we had something that man would never understand. Real strength. Not the kind that comes from intimidation or fear, but the kind that grows when two people refuse to let the world tear them apart. That night, we drove home together in silence, her hand in mine the entire way. It felt like we'd survived a storm and were finally seeing sunlight again. I knew there were still battles ahead, but I also knew something else. Whatever secrets her past held, we were going to face them together. And for the first time in a long time, I believed we'd be okay.